welcome back to Now for Raf Gaming. It's your boy, just me, solo video today. Honestly, Andrew doesn't bring much to the channel, so I think it's going to be totally fine. Probably best video we've ever done, if I'm being totally honest with you. He's kind of the albatross around our neck around here, if you know what I'm saying. I think you'll agree with that. So I had the pleasure of playing in the Bilbo's Birthday Bash tournament over the weekend. This was hosted by Rob Loader. I'm sorry, it was hosted by Chris Hobart and backed up by Rob Loader. Those two guys, if you know them, are just like powerhouses of tournament hosting on the East Coast. So huge gratitude to them. I think without them, our community would be much, much worse off. So massive gratitude to those guys. The tournament was hosted at Your Hobby Place in Fredericksburg, which is an awesome shop. I'll show you a little bit of video around there here in just a second. This was a 5-round, 700-point tournament, and Chris added all kinds of extra cool stuff. There were raffles, there were bingo cards, there was a killmonger count. You pick a hero in your army and keep track of what kills they get. You pick a particular faction or like race of men or elves or whatever to be your targets, and you track all that, so he gives tons of prizes. I ran Assault on Lothlorien, so as you saw, I practiced that a while back on the channel. I knew it was a nasty list, but I'm still pretty new to it, it was a lot of fun. It's a crazy list. I'll probably retire it for a little bit after this, but it was awesome to get 5 games in with it back to back to back. Me and a couple of our friends from our kind of local group here all went together, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it was a fantastic time, so nothing but gratitude.
As I mentioned, the tournament was at Your Hobby Place in Fredericksburg, Virginia. It's definitely one of my favorite game stores. It's not too far from where I live. Usually pretty well stocked. We often stop by anytime we're driving north, like if we're heading to DC or something. My family and I will stop in. I've bought many a board game from this place. But mostly they host awesome tournaments. I've been to, gosh, probably 7 or 8 tournaments there recently. Here's a quick look at the boards. Now I should say that I took this video right when I got there, so the boards were still in progress. A lot of setup was still to occur. These are some of the back tables. Again, I just have nothing but gratitude for people who volunteer their time to host tournaments, to support tournaments, people who make and bring terrain. You know, they get nothing out of it. It's not like there's really any return on this other than, I think, the joy of, you know, seeing other people having a good time at your event. So I just really respect people who do that. I personally really want to get more into providing terrain for the community, and I have done so at the Richmond Open and even on day 2 here.
Okay, so to go over my list really quickly, I had the, you have to have Musger, obviously. I decided to take Druzag, of course. I think Druzag is crucial. I went with Ashrak, although I'm not 100% sure I would stick with Ashrak in the future, but maybe. Either way, I brought Ashrak, and then I really waffled on, well, do I want a Shaman? Do I want to change things around? You know, I knew Courage was going to be an issue. I knew Terror was going to be an issue for this army, but I decided on an Orc Captain just so I had someone who could, you know, really do a little bit of beating. I mean, when he's on a warg and can do heroics and brings March, I just thought he brought a lot to the table. You'll see that I put both of my bats in Ashrak's warband. I honestly don't remember why. I think that was a mistake. I think I should have split them up, had one with Druzag, one with Ashrak, and it did kind of come into play at one point, but overall, pretty happy with the list. As you can see, 14 bows, 6 prowlers, really trying to capitalize on that night fighting. And hey, without further ado, why don't we get into the first game and let's talk about how the list did, okay?
So my first game was against Chris W, and we were on this Lake Town board. We decided to play the water as shallow, which I totally forgot about till much later in the game, but that's neither here nor there. Chris was running the Grey Company, and the mission was Clash by Moonlight, so not a great matchup for him, and it's really just about hero kills.
So as you can see, Chris had Aragorn, he had Legolas, he had the 2 elf twins, Halbarad with his banner, of course, and then a couple of rangers. Look, this was a rough matchup, but when I saw what I was facing, I thought, okay, this is going to be absolutely no problem, right? Because I shut down all of his strength. So he does have 19 points of might, which is a lot, and I know if Aragorn gets in there, they will be chopping. All those guys will be chopping, but you know, there's really just this is such an uphill fight for Chris that it's kind of rough. That being said, the nature of the terrain really actually kind of gave him a pretty good shot, because I wasn't able to just wrap around it. I couldn't get 50 models around his 9. I just couldn't really make it happen. But I did also kind of forget that it was shallow water, so I was like avoiding it like the plague. I was like a little scared of it. But you know, I think in the end the results were pretty predictable.
I will say, however, Chris played these guys really smartly. He was often taking advantage of terrain, and then the models with elven cloaks I couldn't even get shots at, so I did say the results were probably going to be predictable, but actually Chris put up way more of a fight than I think anyone would have wagered looking at this thing on paper. This was a super fun game. I really enjoyed playing with Chris. It was just really a fantastic time all around.
Speaking of the results of the game, in the end it came down to just a 7-4 for me. I only managed a minor victory, which I think is cool, and actually the game wound up being a lot more fun than I would have predicted once the matchups were announced, right? Again, we had a fun time. Chris took a couple of really great chances that actually could have swung it. You know, he really tried to get into Musgar. I kind of left there was one turn where I left it kind of open, but in the end I killed everybody except for Aragorn and one of the twins, I forget whom, but I did manage to get a wound on Aragorn, so it wound up being a 7-4. We both broke on the last turn of the game. He had 1 extra point for having heroes alive, right? His whole army's heroes, but I got 3 for killing more heroes, I got 3 for breaking him, and I did manage to get 1 wound on Aragorn, so it was a 7-4 minor victory out of the first round. So for the second round, I was paired up with Ben Gallagher of Gondor Calls for Ale, one of my favorite, if not my favorite, podcast for Middle-earth strategy battle game. And he was running the Pits of Dol Guldur. So he, of course, had Azog, as I was corrected at the tournament. He was running 2, I think they were both Hunt Orc captains, although now I'm not sure. The list I'm displaying is just my recollection. I don't think it's totally correct. I think it's directionally right. Crucially, I know he had a horn that was pretty sweet. I mean, that gave him a lot of extra courage. And of course, we were doing hold ground, so Maelstrom was going to be a big effect here.
Maelstrom was not kind to me. I won the roll-off, and as you can see, I got Druzag and my Warg captain on the board, and then Ben got Azog and one of his captains right on top of them, and naturally I got jumped, and I am not going to win that fight. It was basically a fighting withdrawal as I sent the Orc captain's force towards the center. Ashrak rolled a 2 to come on the board, but I mighted it down to a 1, not wanting him to appear behind that river over there and take forever to get in. And then he rolled a 1 for the next 4 turns with no might to adjust it. So finally what you're looking at here is turn 6. After Ashrak has arrived, this might even be turn 7. You can see that Ben has really pushed the middle. I've got a lot of guys up there, but I'm getting surrounded and he's like piled into the center. However, Musgar and Ashrak show up at just about the right time, and then Azog fails a combat against Musgar and some boys, takes a bunch of wounds, is left with 1 wound and I believe maybe 1 fate, and then that guy right there, 1 solo orc manages to beat Azog on the charge and put the last wound on him. So miraculously, Azog goes down. When he does, the same turn, his horn goes down, and then after that, I just barely scratch out the middle. I think I might have won that by 1 model, or maybe 2 at best, but I just barely held on and got the leader kill.
Wow. In the end, this game wound up being a 6-1 to me because of 1 ridiculous die roll. Honestly, Ben was absolutely clobbering me across the board. I think, you know, right at the very end, we were putting up a good fight in the middle, but I was poised to just get wrecked. And I think had we had time to go on 1 more round, and of course had Azog not just flubbed that roll. Absolutely astronomical. Because he was going to heroic combat off of that, he was going to go kill some stuff, and he was going to count for being in the middle, and he wouldn't have given up those victory points. So the whole game came down to that 1 orc heroically killing Azog, which is absolutely crazy, and it's one of the super fun things about this game. I mean, honestly, I wrote the game off. Turn 2 or 3, I was like, okay, this is a loss, I'm just going to play it out, we'll see what happens, it's a fun time, Ben's a great guy. And then that 1 roll, that just 1 roll changed absolutely everything in a huge way. So I'm sorry, Ben, that happened. It's insane. I loved playing with you. So in the end, it was a 6-1. I got 3 points for having more guys in the middle. I got 1 point for breaking bin. I think we both broke on the last turn, or maybe I broke right the turn before. I forget exactly. And then I got 2 points for the leader kill, and Ben got 1 point for breaking me. So it wound up being a 6-1. So going into the third game, the last game of day one, I got matched up against Sam. Sam was running at Minas Tirith. He had a Boromir, he had Madril, Huron, and a Bolt Thrower, and a smattering of Rangers, Guards of the Fountain Court, and Tin Can Boys, as you'd expect. And the matchup was Fog of War. So going into this, pretty interesting. You know, I had to think about who I wanted to choose as my target. I think Madril is the squishier one, but I decided on Huron, because if Huron's not up in it, you know, swinging that awesome sword of his, then he's not really getting any value, and you can't just have him sit back. Madril, on the other hand, you know, his value comes from marches, and he has a bow, and you know, he's very budget. So even though he's squishier, I decided to go for Huron. I thought I would have more of an opportunity, and that's for who I wanted to protect. I chose Ashrak because that paralyze is just so detrimental. I think it's scary and people don't necessarily want to hit him. He dies easy, obviously, if someone gets into him, but the risk of that paralysis on a Boromir, on a Huron who has broken through my lines is pretty great. So Ashrak was my protect, Huron was my target, and there was a piece of terrain that was obviously my terrain. The board was fairly symmetrical. And, you know, I wasn't sure who he was going to choose as my targets. I kind of assumed it was going to be Druzag or my Orc Captain. I mean, my Orc Captain was, you know, absolutely going to be fighting much like Huron. In the end, it was my Orc Captain that he chose, of course, which surprised me because he went pretty hard for Druzag and managed to take him out. But of course, that hurts too. I mean, getting rid of Enraged Beast is massive. So anyways, let's watch a little bit of the video, and I'll provide a little extra voiceover towards that.
I sort of assumed that big rock with the spider there was Sam's objective. That was his terrain piece. I didn't know which hero of mine he was going after, except, like I said, I was reasonably sure it was the Orc Captain, but I wasn't positive since the others are quite squishy, and he has so much might for heroic combats. Sam played a very clean game, one of the best maneuvering opponents I've ever faced. He's really, really precise at placement, and he sure used up his might doing heroic combats with Boromir and Huron. This is really towards like the mid-late part of the game. You can see I have a spider hanging over there. What you can't see is he has a Citadel guard camping out in that terrain piece, so I kind of figured that was it. Towards the end of the game, he was, you know, wrecking. I was killing models here and there as well. Those are my two orcs going towards my terrain piece with Madril blocking me. I did not get there, but it was a bloody, knockdown, fun fight.
So in the end, that game wound up being a 7-4 for me. I took out Huron, and I think the last turn, like right in the last few seconds of the game, a fairly lucky roll, to be honest. I managed to take him down. So I got 3 points for Huron, I got 3 points for protecting Ashrak, and I got 1 point for breaking Sam. He had 4 points, he had 1 point for breaking me, and he had 3 points for protecting his, which was Madril. Neither one of us got our terrain piece, and you know, neither one of us is really all that close to getting our terrain piece. That fight was pretty brutal in the middle. I should say a quick apology to Sam. At one point I moved a bat to block Boromir. He had a control zone. Boromir didn't have a control zone because he had already charged, and I was very confidently wrong in saying, no, I just ignore control zones. That is super not the case, so I was wrong and confidently wrong. I don't know that it would have had a major effect on the outcome, but you know, this game is a little bit of a butterfly effect. You never know what one die roll could do, but on the following turn, that bat moved to hold my terrain piece, but then I managed to kill his one model contesting it anyway, so I don't know that it would have made a big difference. Boromir might have gotten 1 or 2 more kills. He might have even killed my leader, but my leader was doing nothing at that point. So I just don't know, but apology to Sam for being not only wrong, but confidently wrong. And I really enjoyed playing Sam, so look forward to many more games in the future. So that meant after day one, I was on 10 victory points. I had 2 minors and a major. And going into day 2, I found out I was paired up against my friend John. Now, John was running Angmar. His list is right here. It's a list I'm fairly confident with. I've run it several times myself. I really actually enjoy it. It's probably my favorite list in the entire game. I just love the little control-y stuff. I know it's not super fun for everybody to face, so I don't play it all the time, but it is just a blast. So I kind of knew his tricks. Now, I would feel somewhat confident in that matchup in a lot of situations, and we were playing to the death, so I was very confident in that situation. However, he was unwilling to come towards me. I was unwilling to come towards him. So let's take a look at some of that footage.
This was a really, actually fairly interesting game. Given that it's to the death, we have to either break each other, kill banners, or kill each other's leaders, and neither one of us felt very confident in our ability to do that. John knew if he approached me, I could get really lucky on shooting. I knew that if I approached him, I opened up my backfield for Guldur doing tricks. 2, a Fell Light is in them, and a Compel means he could open up my banner and just suicide Guldur in to kill my banner or my leader. So for honestly 8-9 turns, we jockeyed back and forth. At one point, John moved all the way around the table and all the way back before finally, deep into the game, we called this thing a draw.
Yeah, so we basically pushed models back and forth and cage before we were like, no more of this. Okay, so yeah, that was a completely bloodless draw, one of the weirdest games I've ever played, but I completely stand by it. I was not going to push forward to open myself up to mistakes that Guldur could capitalize on. I knew that all he had to do to win to the death was black dart my banner if I was dumb and left him out of position, or use his specters to do 2 different Fell Lights and in them to move things away, and then heroic combat off Guldur. He also had a Compel. All he had to do was kill Musgur, kill my banner, and he wins the game, and I had much less ability to reach out and do that to him. So I turtled up, unwilling to come forward. He looked to my gun line and was similarly unwilling to come forward. So that was that. So going into the final round, John and I both had 12 tournament points, so we were ranked somewhere near the top, and being a 5-round tournament with 24 players, I actually got paired up against Sam again. So Sam, again, running his Minas Tirith list. Minas Tirith. I like that better, I think. That kind of rolls off the tongue a little better. We'll switch to that permanently. Anyhow, the final game was Divide and Conquer, which I did not love with my list. He's a lot more mobile, A, because my movement is 5 with my goblins, B, because he's got March on Madril and a bunch of cavalry, so I didn't love that, but I did manage to win the roll-off, and the terrain was a little bit more advantageous for me. I had clean alleys to the middle, and he had to kind of break around some buildings, so we'll roll the footage and talk about that a little bit right now.
Here you can see one of Sam's corners where he put the majority of his force, both Boromir and Madril's warbands. Up in the top left there, that is Druzag and Musgur for me, so kind of my main force with just over half of my models. Up in the top center is Sam's other warband, which was Huron and his knights and his bolt thrower, and then I have Ashrak and my orc captain right there. Now my thought process was to try to beeline towards the center with both warbands, knowing that I'm probably going to wind up being slower than Sam. Here's about the midpoint of the game. You can see my one warband has reached that middle, and he has reached with only some of his models. Meanwhile, Boromir and Madril's warbands are just absolutely beating up on the main part of my army. Now in the end, we both broke at about the same time, right towards the end of the game. I had just enough models on that center to outnumber him, but yeah, it was a brutal game. It was a ton of fun. Again, Sam is an incredible opponent. It was fantastic.
So in the end, my final game with Sam, fantastically close. Sam is a great player, very precise, very friendly, but very clearly competitive. Just an awesome game. Look forward to playing with Sam again. Wound up being a 6-3 to me. I held the central objective with more models than he did, but he did have models contesting it, making that 3 VPs. I held one of the side objectives for 2 VPs, and I broke him for 1. He broke me for 1 and killed my leader for 2, so that came down to a 6-3. Now, unfortunately, Sam and I both erroneously thought those side objectives were worth 3 points as we were scoring up the final tally and looking at the board state, so we did report that as a 7-3, which was significant. So in the end, that put me in first place by 1 VP, and I did not notice the error until I came to do this video. So unfortunately, on the day, I got first and found out later that should not be the case. Super bummed about that, but mostly just kind of frankly embarrassed, a little bit humiliated, but I messaged everyone in the group. I reached out to the tournament organizers, let everybody know what had happened. They've updated it and discovered that in fact it would have swapped me out of first into second, and the second place would have swapped into first, and it had no other major impact. That's because the tiebreakers were wins, draws, losses. So in first place was John running Angmar. He had 4 wins and a draw. I was in second place with 4 wins and a draw, but 1 victory point behind because I had 3 minor victories, 1 major. He had 2 majors and 2 minors. In third place was Caleb running Mordor and the Serpent Horde, your everyone's favorite Witch King Suladan combo, and he had 4 wins and a loss, which is what made the difference here because I had fewer VPs, but I had 0 losses. So in the end, very happy to podium. Obviously, felt a little bad about that mix-up. I think both Sam and I don't know why we thought that was 3. I guess because there's 18 scenarios in the game, and we just got mixed up. And even as we were talking about it, like, yep, those are 3. That one's 3. Cost you 3 there when that happened. Blah blah blah. So just a bummer that got away from us. But in the end, what an awesome time. I really enjoyed driving up with my friend Chris. We, of course, the road trips, half the fun, all the chit chat, having beers over lunch with everybody, making new friends, seeing old friends, just a fantastic time. Again, another massive thank you to Chris and Rob. I think people like them who organize and set up tournaments they're truly the lifeblood of the community, and they deserve all the gratitude in the world. So I hope everyone who's watching this remembers to thank your tournament organizers, because these things don't happen without them. It's not like there's some organization that puts this on here in the States. I mean, we don't even have a Hobbit League like they do in England. Certainly there's clubs and things, but these people don't do this for money. Nobody's getting paid. It's just, out of the goodness of their hearts and their desire to see a community flourish and thrive. So anyways, without further ado, once again, thanks everyone for watching, and thanks to all my opponents, and we'll see you in the next battle report.